This is TK Coleman, and you're listening to Small Business Edge by Ceteris. This is the podcast where we deconstruct small business entrepreneurship through conversations with franchisees, passion-based business owners, and other experts. We learn what it takes to succeed. Today's guest is Damon Carnes. Damon is a regional developer for Amazing Lash and also a multi-unit franchise owner for Massage Envy. Damon, thanks for joining me today.
It is my pleasure. Thanks, TK.
Damon, I would love to hear about your entrepreneurial philosophy and your background and experiences. But before we begin with that, why don't we start with you giving us a brief primer on what Amazing Lash is all about?
Well, Amazing Lash Studio happens to be one of the fastest growing franchise opportunities in the country. We were lucky to get in very early back at the end of 2014, shortly after they had begun to franchise. And it is a beauty franchise that is focused on, at this time, eyelash extensions and lash-related products. We have 4 proprietary looks and a proprietary installation method, and that allow us to be a very repeatable, attractive franchise that allows people who, like me, are not necessarily from the beauty industry to be able to effectively work and manage within this environment. So we're very excited. We have several units that we have sold and opened in our territories already. There's well over 100 units open, and the Entrepreneur magazine just ranked us 272 in the Franchise 500, and it's our first ranking after franchising for only 2 years. So I think that's very impressive, and the growth is magnificent. And we have seen it as a great opportunity. And not only are we regional developers, but we opened our own studio.
Congratulations on that ranking. That's really great news.
We're very excited. And the Lees and Heather Elrod have done a great job leading this organization, and it's growing rapidly. So anyone who doesn't know about it and is interested in franchising, I think it is a great opportunity for them to go investigate.
Damon, one of my agendas is to dispel the myth that people who are great at what they do are people who have been doing it since they were 5 years old and they never knew anything else. I'd like you to take me back before you began the franchising business. What were you doing before then, and how did you get into it?
Interestingly enough, we have no history of franchising in my family, in my history. No one I know owned a franchise. I had looked at certain things many years ago when Subway was growing, but never jumped on board. But really, my background is I worked for a small family company through high school and worked for a McDonald's, worked flipping burgers through high school, went to college, became a mechanical engineer, went into the United States Air Force as an officer and spent about 5 years active duty, and then went back to work for the family company. We were acquired by a competitor and moved into a large organization, which pushed me into a whole different vein where I ended up working for 2 very, very large Fortune 500 companies, Johnson Controls and Honeywell, which were just incredible experiences. I was at one point in time managing operations across 7 states with 200 employees spread remotely, and there was nothing about it that was highly entrepreneurial. There was nothing about it that was very franchise driven, but I did recognize that there were certain things I was very good at, and one of them was executing on process. And my wife and I met about 8 years ago, and we'd been dating about 3 months when I took her to the first Massage Envy that she'd ever been in, and she loved it. And we walked out and got in the car, and she looked at me and she goes, "I want to own one of these one day." So about 2 years later, we found out that her job as a specialty drug rep was being eliminated. The drug had gone generic, and they were going to let the whole force go. But they gave them an 18-month lead to be able to find another job. And she decided, instead of going off into the world of searching for another opportunity as in the pharmaceutical world, she goes, "Let's pursue the Massage Envy." So we actually started negotiations and decided to relocate to Huntsville, Alabama. The demographics were spectacular. They had a need. There weren't any consolidated massage vendors in this area. So to bring a Massage Envy in was a great way to penetrate a market. They had fantastic demographics, fantastic growth. And so we moved here about 5.5 years ago and went into business and have loved it. It worked well because my wife is very, very detailed, handles the financial side of the business very well, which frees me up to be operations. And we now have 2 Massage Envies, an Amazing Lash Studio, regional developers, and all of them are along the same vein that I recognized something that I did well, and my wife recognized what she did well. And we were able to marry those together in a way that allowed us to see franchising as a way to take our strengths and play to them, and to take things that were not necessarily our strengths, such as we're not going to have the next great business idea, most likely. We're not going to come up with this most incredible idea that's going to make us millions, but we could easily take great ideas from other people and repeat them over and over and over.
You know, this story really speaks highly of the customer service provided by Massage Envy. Anytime you go to a business and they do such a good job that they not only make you say, I want to come back for more, but I want to do what you do, that is phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. So one of the interesting things about dreams is they tend to start off with these romantic visions. I mean, I imagine if someone made a movie about your life, one of the best scenes would be the part where you and your wife get into the car and she says, I want to own one of these. That would be the part of the motivational speech that everyone talks about. But usually what happens shortly after that moment is we encounter unanticipated obstacles that, you know, kind of introduce us to harsh reality very quickly. What was your first unanticipated obstacle?
It was actually around real estate space. My wife had picked out the place that we ultimately ended up locating, and we began negotiating with them, and it became very difficult. And we ended up in a situation where we were about to sign a lease that we were not happy with. We were not in the space we wanted. Things were not the way we wanted. We didn't have the TI we wanted. We were still negotiating with the bank around funding, and we were sitting. At that point in time, there wasn't even a Target Plaza there. It was a big empty cornfield in an area that you really had to have some imagination and vision to see what was going to be coming, because at that point in time, there was not a lot to say, wow, this is a really good business decision. And it was somewhat terrifying. And we were sitting there and she looked at me and she goes, get me out of here. I don't want to look at this, and we need to go back to the drawing board on lease space and negotiation and get me out of here. And we actually stopped and began looking at all sorts of different areas. We looked at the other side of town, and we kept running the numbers and running the demographics. And we finally had to sit down and take all the emotion out of it and purely look at the numbers. And from a business decision, the place that she had from her gut picked first was the right place. And 9 months later, we ended up in that center, in a different location in that center. We are very well located next to a lot of women-driven businesses, and we have done very well. We have nearly 2,000 members in that location in 5 years, and we are relocating now into a bigger space because we've outgrown it. But there was that harsh moment of, we've never done this before. We don't know what we're doing. Please don't let us make a big mistake. I'm afraid we're making a big mistake. And we second guessed ourselves all the way out of one space. And it was by sheer luck that we came back to them and they had room for us, because we easily could have waited too long and been out, because there really wasn't another space that would work for us in that center when we came back to them.
What was the biggest lesson you learned from that experience?
Trust the numbers. If you do your homework and you vet it with people who are knowledgeable and you know it is a solid business decision, you've got to take the emotion out of it and you need to make a business decision.
When you talked about your success earlier, you said a big part of it was being honest with yourself about the fact that you probably weren't going to come up with the next big multi-million-dollar idea. This is quite a common stereotype. Many people who want to be entrepreneurs, they want to achieve financial freedom. They feel like it's all about being the next Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or nothing else. Do you have any insights to offer on that stereotype, how people can deal with that?
There was a book that I read many, many years ago that talked about how to become financially independent and ultimately rich. And there was one lesson in it that stuck with me, and it was multiple streams of income. In the world of business, the best way to get rich and stay rich is multiple streams of income. And franchising allows you to do that in a very, very easy manner. You can open one store, make it successful. Then like cookie cutter, you can go repeat multiple units within that store. Or like us, we did multiple units and now we're venturing out into another brand because we wanted some diversification, not everything in one line of business. And we're also now venturing out geographically to get more diversification. So we have multiple streams of income coming from our 2 Massage Envy clinics, an Amazing Lash Studio, a regional developership, and we are geographically dispersed. Our actual next location that we open a new storefront will be in a completely different geography because we are diversifying ourselves. And I've never forgotten the lesson of the best way to make it is multiple streams of income. And there are a lot of people who get there by doing one thing and one thing really, really well. And, we've got good friends who are home builders and they've done very well and they have only one business and one stream. But I have found this in terms of being able to generate a good amount of income in a short amount of time and make it repeatable and then be able to diversify and protect yourself. Franchising to me was a very, very easy way to do it. And it gave me so much ability to diversify because I can move into other brands or I can move into other geographies. And I've always lived by that. And I've worked very hard to get into an environment where we had multiple streams of income because it's easier said than done.
Easier said than done. I want you to expound on that more.
It is easy to say you want multiple streams of income, but it is very challenging to find a way to develop a secondary stream of income. If you have a full-time job and you are working doing one thing, how do you do something else that generates enough income to be meaningful, but yet doesn't require the same time that your job does? Or what can you do if you have a day job that you can do on nights and weekends or something else that allows you the freedom to be able to grow and make more money, but yet you still have to protect your initial stream. You can't abandon A to go pursue B. You need to protect A while you build B, and B needs to be meaningful. There are a lot of people out there who, you can go if you're teach piano or teach dance, but you can do that on the side of a second full-time job. But then that only represents so much money. And there's a point in time where you need to realize that you need to leverage other people in order to make more money. And that's where being an owner comes into play, because then you are able to leverage the skills and talents of many people. You create jobs, you enable people to be able to be successful. And at the same time, each one of them helps you grow your business and achieve more success. And the power of one is great, but the power of many is how you really make money. Because if you are one person with one job or one person with two jobs, eventually you only have so much bandwidth. But if you are one person directing 200 people, well, you have the ability to generate a lot more revenue and a lot more profit as opposed to what you can generate by yourself.
Damon, what would you say to the person who's hearing you talk about this and they're thinking to themselves, that's the life I want to have, but I'm overwhelmed by it all. I don't know anything about finding good real estate or property scouting. I don't even know a whole lot about how to procure the best kind of loan and how to see through the people that might, rip me off or take advantage of me. Where do I even begin?
And those are incredible questions. And I had all of those fears and all of that lack of knowledge in the beginning. And the great thing about franchising is they are very, very strictly bound by federal law to keep from ripping people off, as you said. So they are tightly controlled. But at the same time, you have to remember, in the world of a franchisor, one of the worst things that can possibly happen is a unit failure. So they have a vested interest in making all of their franchisees successful. So there is a vetting process where they make sure that you're a good fit, that you do have the financial resources, that you can secure the funding. They have lenders that they work with. They have creative financing through 401k rollover and many tools that they can lead people to. And each franchise that I have worked with has a very detailed process from what you do from the first time that you call them and start asking questions to help educate you, to help you do the validation calls and talk to other franchisees and confirm what you want to do, all the way through to buying your franchise, securing your real estate, negotiating contractors, making sure that they share with you what good pricing looks like so that you can do that. They help you through the architectural and design phase. Everything is very, very structured in the world of franchising. So when you don't know, you have questions that can get answered by people who do know. And the other thing that is incredible is whether it's Amazing Lash, where you've got more than 100 who are open and a whole network of regional developers, or if it's Massage Envy and there's 1,200 units and they're going global, you have a network of other owners who are almost always willing to answer your questions and help. So even though they are busy running their own businesses and doing their own thing, you would be surprised the number that will pick up the phone and take that phone call and openly and honestly answer questions and help new people along. My wife and I received so much help when we got into this from other franchisees who were in our region. So when other people came along and wanted to open, we paid it forward. And there is a community within each of those franchises of owners because you are married through the brand. You don't want someone else to struggle. You don't want someone else to fail. When they do well, you do well. When the brand grows, everyone grows. The better the brand is recognized and the more successful it is, the easier it is for everyone to win. So it is truly a community in the world of franchising. And of course, you will have your outliers who I don't want to, I'm really successful. I don't want to share anything I do. I don't want to tell you anything I do because I've spent years perfecting this and I don't want to give it away. But for the most part, it is a community of folks who are willing to take time and help each other and share best practices. And it really makes a difference when you don't know what you're doing to get you up to speed very quick and to allow you to avoid making a myriad of mistakes that, we've all made them. We've all struggled. We've all had business issues. I've made incredibly bad decisions in the past that I would like to have not repeated, whether it was getting into a legal battle that cost a lot of money that I shouldn't have engaged in, or, venturing down a path with a customer who ultimately was not going to pay. We help as a network and a community in franchising to keep people out of those traps. So that if you make mistakes, they're usually smaller and correctable, and it's easy to recognize them because you have benchmarks and metrics and KPIs that have been built that allow you to know what good looks like.
Damon, you've given us a lot of valuable insight into your first unanticipated obstacle, some of your past failures. What's the most difficult thing for you today?
We have about 100 employees. Mm-hmm. And it is strictly keeping up with the rules and regulations around people. Managing people is in of itself a huge time-consuming task. You've got 100 employees, and I do have managers layered in there who help, but for the most part, you've got 100 people who you are responsible for. And on top of that, the most complex part of it all is regulatory compliance. So we utilize vendors, third-party vendors, to keep us out of trouble in the world of payroll processing and HR management. And I had quite a bit of experience and I had a good idea of how to do it. But at the same time, as we have more and more laws, the Affordable Care Act really made compliance and reporting much more complex and changed all the rules. They're talking about changing the limitations on overtime and exempt employees. So you need someone who can help you with the regulatory environment as you grow. When you have one unit and you got 20 or 30 employees, it's not that challenging. But we got so large in a period, we had 75 employees in 3 years from zero. So we just decided that the best way to do it was utilize third-party vendors. And the other thing that we realized was that bookkeeping and accounting is a huge time-consuming task that is low reward, low return. And Ceteris has been an incredible partner in freeing us up to actually run our business. So that is something that I would encourage people, if they get into any form of business, recognize what your high time consuming, low return tasks are and outsource those. There's companies like Ceteris and other payroll processing companies, HR management companies that do that, do it every day, do it very, very well, and do it for a lot less money than you're spending to do it yourself.
It is amazing to consider how much greatness has to do with, one, being honest with yourself about what you're not great at, which is what you talked about earlier, and two, being honest with yourself about what you possibly could be great at, but isn't very profitable for you to invest in, which seems to be the case with the Ceteris thing. Damon, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. I appreciate you telling us your story and sharing these valuable insights. Is there anything people could do if they were interested in learning more about how to franchise with Massage Envy or Amazing Lash?
Everything is online, so go to AmazingLashStudio.com or MassageEnvy.com. Each have their own franchise pages, as well as there are numerous websites out there dedicated strictly to franchising. If they want to look at other opportunities, there's multiple ways online where you can become quite educated before you get in, and you can also see what the investments are, what the time is, what the constraints are, and become an educated consumer and use the tools, and definitely go to the websites and read about the companies that you're interested in.
Damon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, TK. I appreciate it.
For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit Ceteris.com/podcast.